Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. in Central Europe. It's time for our very first Space Café Singapore by Lynette Tan. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback, and we constantly learn and improve based on the feedback you give us. So my name is Chiara Monter. I'm the event coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global. SpaceWatch.Global is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. And I'd like to take this moment to thank all our private and corporate supporters that have showed their commitment to keeping our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate that. Now, I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and our daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. The latest episode features sustainability professor Judith Wells from St. Gallen University and is definitely worth a listen. And we also have new and exciting episodes in our Space Café radio. The latest one is with Craig Donlan, the principal scientist for oceans and ice at ESA, who we met at the Living Planet Symposium in Bonn. So don't miss out. We also have a fan shop online for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. Now, if you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our webpage in the events section and on our YouTube channel. And if you're looking for our latest space cafes, the 33 Minutes with CEST, our Space Law Breakfast, and our Space Café Austria, we do have a bit of a backlog, so be patient, they will be out very soon. Now, we will host our Space Café Singapore live on a regular basis. And with that, my job is done, and I'd love to hand you over to your host for today. Lynette, over to you.
Hi everyone. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Thank you for having us here, and I'm really excited to have Mani with me today. And I think it's really interesting because sometimes when you hear of what's happening in a country, you hear it from somebody who lives there. But I thought it would be particularly interesting, because Mani came into Singapore from another place. And she also literally did that just less than 12 hours ago, flying in, to do this with us. So I think it'll be nice to hear her views about what's happening. And the red dot is a common terminology used locally to represent Singapore, which is a really, really small country. But we are very excited about the space programs and mission that we have. So certainly nice to hear it from Mani's perspective, and also, to welcome the participants in the chat room. I think I recognize some of you here. It would be really interesting if you could ask questions to either Mani or me, and to find out what's going on here. So again, thank you, Mani, for having us. For being with us here today. Like I said, you have been in Singapore for some time now. I remember you came in during the COVID period. Do you still remember what it felt like when you first came to Singapore? And maybe share with some of our audience here your impression, in particular, of the space scene here.
Hi, Lynette. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Chiara and Torsten, for having me. I have tremendous respect for the work that the Space Watchers do, and also actually SSTL. So I came into Singapore right in the middle of COVID, which was a sort of an exciting adventure in and of itself. But one of the things that really impressed me, like I knew about you and SSTL way before I came into Singapore. I knew that there was a community of space professionals, entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, researchers, a lot of different segments of the Singaporean ecosystem were already quite interested, building and designing things for the space industry. So the initial few days for me were a little bit traumatic, to say the least, because I came in literally into a shutdown, into a lockdown. So I wasn't really able to meet a lot of the people that I had waited so long to have a face-to-face discussion with. But in that time, I used that time basically to connect with them offline and do quite a bit of research. So the things that I kept finding out, whether it was through verbal conversation or just through research, was pretty impressive. For a small nation, I think Singapore, their little red dot, punches above its weight. Since a lot of my learnings came from knowing that since the early 2000s, Singapore has been slowly, quietly, steadily building out, making its mark in outer space. And I think earlier this year, the government actually put down $150 million for investment in research and development of space capabilities. And they include, a lot of people, still there's this misnomer that space is technology for, or travel far, far deep into the galaxy, when in fact it's actually supporting critical domains right here on Earth and allowing us to flourish and prosper in our own local communities. So things like maritime security, sustainability, disruptive technologies that are actually dual use purpose and not just applicable for space, but also right here on Earth. And the fact that Singapore is a good and fundamental part of that. 50 companies, I think, are involved across Singapore, something like 1,800 employees. These are stats that were singularly impressive to me. And today, a year and a bit later, I can see how it all works, having met many of the entrepreneurs, the builders, and the startup people here. So I'm super excited. The initial days of coming in and having to do a lot of these conversations over a video call has now translated into actual site visits, getting to know people, having coffee. There's nothing, there's nothing more exciting than being on the ground, particularly with space nerds, as I like to say, because you never know where the conversation is going to go.
Great, thanks. And I was going to ask you, what kept you busy in the early days when you couldn't meet people in person, but you want to know about what's happening here? Was it a lot of, meetings online? And how has that changed now? And I also realized you have been traveling quite a bit. So great. But yeah, how was the transition from meeting people online, having the connection, and then moving now where it's easy to grab coffee and grab lunch and go for meetings in people's office?
Any part of the mission, I think people are always the most interesting and the most elemental. It's the foundation of everything that we do. And so for me, it's been nothing short of wonderful to sit down and have these conversations. And I was kind of excited because, in-person conversations allow you to go deeper. And so much of what I'd read about space companies and satellite companies making movements here, much of what I read about is you have so much more richer conversations when it's in person. So one of the things, I soon quickly came to understand, Singapore is not, the ambition of a lot of the space entrepreneurs here isn't necessarily to compete with the larger spacefaring nations necessarily. They seem to have their own unique niche skills, disruptive technologies for small satellites, quantum, propulsion systems. So, the companies that are here, the founders, the teams that are working, I find that they're young, they're entrepreneurial, they've come out of university or academic backgrounds, so they're very, very sheltered, very deeply ingrained in the technical aspects of, it's not just, let's build a space company and make billions of dollars. There's some technical nuance to this. They're veterans, essentially, of a lot of the tech stacks that they're dealing with. So companies like Celestial, Rohit, for instance, with his laser comms, Add Value, Zero Error Systems, Alina, New Space. There's so many vibrant little startups which have received international attention with funding. So to sort of come into an ecosystem that is going gangbusters is exciting. And for me personally, it's not always clear to a lot of people where cloud fits into the space mission. So I should probably explain a little bit more about what we do, what I do, or where I fit into the conversation or the ecosystem. So AWS Cloud is essentially helping lower barriers, lower the entry barriers into the space industry. So it doesn't matter what size of organization you are, we will have cloud solutions. It's a global infrastructure, unmatched portfolio of services, of innovative services like high performance computing, artificial intelligence, access to ground station as a service. These are solutions that can help accelerate space missions. Typically, you'd have to spend a lot of money investing in these services. And what we do is we take away that abstract software layer and allow you to stitch together a set of solutions which can fit into your mission. And it's not just the technical, I guess, sophistication of accelerating missions. It's also things like cost, the fact that you pay per minute, you pay on demand for what you use. So for a lot of startups, it's a function of cost. It's a function of how much you want to build, iterate, and you can chuck the whole thing away, start again from scratch if you have to. There's no money there's no money lost with that, because again, you're just paying for what you use. So cost, security, scalability, it's also really flexible, because you can build a solution in Singapore, but it's portable or scalable across the globe. Those are some of the solutions that cloud adds to space missions. So my task essentially is to evangelize where cloud, what the value that cloud value proposition brings to the space industry. And a lot of my time has actually been looking at Singapore is a great hub. It's renowned as a financial hub. And I think some days to come, it might even be renowned as a space hub. A lot of work that you're doing, Lynette, with SSTL, with GSTC, for instance, the conferences that you're having, the strong pull that you have for all the other space agencies means that you're the center of action here. So very similar for me, I'm growing out a team that's supporting different markets. So we're supporting markets in India, in Japan, in Korea, in Australia. So building out teams that can satisfy customer requirements in these different geographies across Asia. That's kind of a lot of what I've been spending my time on, getting that message out there. This is how we can make a difference to your mission. This is how we can help, etc. Does that give you a sense?
No, that's great. That's great. And I think it's important to let people realize that, sometimes we talk about space technology and we always think that we're going into the unknown. For some of you with daughters, that is also a song in Frozen. But there is a lot of practical applications, and in providing the services that the startups, the entrepreneurs based in Singapore are doing. So being able to provide business services to support it is really important. Even if we're not going deep into space, you need to be able to store your data securely.
Correct.
You need to be able to manage the data and the information surrounding it. So I think that's why it's important to understand the different players in the ecosystem. As you pointed out, Mani, a lot of them are spun out from the universities, and they've got very good technical capabilities on what they are doing. So it's good to have a supporting ecosystem that provides the business networking platform, such as the Global Space and Technology Convention that's happening next year in February, and then having business services that takes the security, the cloud, the space to store the space data in a trusted solution. So, it sounds like you
I know, I was going to say, we should probably ground this conversation in a couple of examples. Otherwise, everyone's like, so security, so cloud, so space, tell me how does it actually all work? I was just, as you were talking, I was like, no, let's give a couple of examples. I'll give you 2 examples specifically from Singapore, since it's Singapore Space Café. We work with a company, these are our customers. So we work with a company called Café. Pacific Satellites, their broadband satellite group. They're next generation broadband satellite operator, and they use AWS for their system support infrastructure. Using cloud allows them to provide high quality, low cost satellite broadband internet connectivity. So especially during COVID, when online connectivity was such a critical thing, they were able to improve the lives of, students, educators, remote health practitioners by allowing people to have access to connectivity. So, between the combination between rapid deployment, cost-effective support services allows them to extend their footprint and service a whole bunch of regions which previously had difficulty having access to go online. So that's one little example, right? Because we're helping the customer's customer is how we see it. And something that's a little bit different, so that's a satellite provider access to masses that are disconnected. A different kind of startup, EO Factory, you may have heard of them. They're a Singaporean startup. And what they do is they use Earth observation data and they run it on an AWS platform. And it's essentially providing insights. They're running algorithms on massive data sets. And it's curated specifically for farmers or for insurance companies that are giving farmers loans in order to grow crop. And there's so many different applications with what you can do with Earth observation data, right? So it can be farmers, it can be agriculture, farming, financing, lending for insurance operators. It can be smart city management. They can monitor, is there new buildings emerging without building permits? So if someone building a swimming pool on top of their building without getting the right permission. So there's change monitoring that can be done, and that's what EO Factory is doing. And they do that to help governments, to help the end user, like a farmer, predict, how did my crop, what is my crop productivity like this season? What can I expect based on the weather patterns of the past? So it's both commercial organizations, communities, and governments that they can work towards better sustainable practices through the use of satellite imagery, which is being processed on huge, what we call data lakes. Essentially, it's just data sets running on cloud. And then machine learning that is helping them process through massive sets of data, petabytes of data, to get information in a very timely manner in order to enable decision making. So I think those are the two sort of two examples, which is kind of different. One is actually, generating better connectivity, the link, the comms link. The second is taking that comms link and then creating insights or valuable intelligence that can then be used to act upon different scenarios, whether that's farming or disaster response. All of that is possible.
Great. I was just curious, you have these examples from Singapore, and thank you very much for localizing it. How does that compare, or maybe there are also other insights from other countries that you've worked with or from your experience that maybe we could learn from or get inspiration from, or even consider collaboration opportunities? Do you think you could maybe give some examples out of this red dot?
Yeah. So there are companies across the globe that are utilizing, we can break them down into sort of upstream space and downstream space, right? So upstream is anything that is for us, building, designing, launching a satellite or a spacecraft. Downstream is everything where you connect to the satellite that's being launched, you downlink all that information, and then you use that information to process it, to then generate intelligence for other sectors. Could be defense, could be agriculture, etc. So every space company that we work with falls into one or two of those buckets. It's essentially data management. It's space, as far as we're concerned, space missions, data is the backbone of all space missions. So God, where do I start? There's so many companies doing so many interesting things. In the US, we have Capella Space. Capella is all in on AWS. They use our ground stations to connect to their satellite constellations. They run the data processing, the sort of the imaging that they get is run on AWS. This is super fast. It allows them to produce intelligence that can be fed to a variety of their customers, different customers, right? So it could be anything from smart city management to surveillance to defense to humanitarian response efforts, like we've seen a lot of the satellite image providers like Planet, Maxar, Capella. We've seen lots of visuals in Ukraine, for instance. So they're using it for really good, useful, purposeful things. Across Asia, there is Infostellar in Japan is a company that we're working with closely. They're also they're integrated into our ground station. They've got their ground station network integrated into ours. So it just allows for a lot more expansivity in terms of connecting to, depends on which paths, which orbits you're looking to capture data from. So there's potential there for a collaboration. In actual fact, Lynette, so there's potential for collaboration, I think, anywhere you look, whether it's Australia or India. There's companies that are doing really interesting things with space technology, particularly in Australia. The things that jump out for me is data farming, is an agriculture. I want to call it a smart intelligence agriculture company, because they provide intelligence to I forget the exact number of farmers, but they've got pretty much all of the farmers in Australia accessing intelligence on demand. And it's things that are, Australia's a massive country, the farmyards are pretty big. They go for acres and acres. So simple things like boundary mapping, knowing where how healthy your paddocks are, if cows like fallen into a well. Usually, you'd have not a cowboy. What's what's the equivalent of a cowboy in Australia? So he'd have to go and pull but now you can do it all on an iPad. And it's all through satellite technology. It's all through data. It's all through cloud. So and to answer your questions, it's early days, because the possibility of what we can do with this kind of data is still, I don't think we're fully there yet. It's like when we had the emergence of apps on phones. Now we've got so many, we don't even know what do you need. There's multiple for so many applications, but I think we're at that stage where the only, limit, we're only bound by imagination. Anything that we want to do with data and space, there's still so much more to come.
You spoke about Capella in the US, and then EO factory in Singapore, and then of course the research. So there are upstream and downstream activities. And I think I was just recently in the US. I feel there is a nice value chain, simply also because the vibrancy of the market in the US. How about in Asia, where budgets are also relatively smaller, the talent pool is also smaller? Then do you find that there's always a lot of vertical integration, or do you think there are pockets there will be companies who will be very discreet in being in the upstream segment and being in the downstream segment? And from there, how does AWS hope to support the development of the space ecosystem in Asia?
So to answer the first part of your question, upstream and downstream verticalization versus saying as discrete providers. What I'm seeing across Asia, there's a lot of discrete providers, so EO factory, very specific to data intelligence from satellite. Pacific, very specific to satellite connectivity, maybe some broadband, other value-added services that might come later down the track. There are few and far that are highly integrated, like a Planet or a Maxar, who go end to end. But I think it's sort of an advantage for the Asian ecosystem, because we're still sort of developing, right? And we haven't got to a stage where JAXA or ISRO is, putting out tenders to the market just yet, in the way that maybe NASA does, where you've got to have capability standards which are quite high. That requires a certain level of maturity. I don't think we're there yet. I think in the future, we could see these you talk about partnerships, but they could just as well be amalgamations. Maybe there's maybe there's companies that merge. There might be acquisitions. I think we're early days. I think we're still 5, I don't know, some more years out, as each company matures and stands for something definitive in its own right. So I think we have a long way to go towards verticalization, companies verticalizing in the space sector in Asia. But I've forgotten the second part of your question. How do we support? Oh, we, to me, it doesn't really make a difference to me whether you're a small company or a big company. We will support you either way. Our interest is in making sure that you're gaining the value from cloud, because it's really the mission that you're doing, right? You might be a small company, you might be a startup, and we have programs for startups, but you might be the startup that turns into the next unicorn. So I'm just as vested in interest in helping you as I am maybe an enterprise-sized company, which is already supporting a government. They are an enterprise because they've got the capability stream and the workforce management embedded enough to support a government mission. So we don't make any distinction in terms of who we support. We'll support everyone: commercial, government, startups, enterprises. Yeah.
And I was going to ask you. So I know you're very productive and you have a lot of energy in the work that you do. What has been some of the most memorable or fun projects you've done in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I feel like we've been running at like 100 miles an hour. We try to do a lot.
Yeah, I feel like you have been running at more than that.
So I'll mention a couple of things which again are sort of relevant to Singapore, but also sort of emblematic of the type of work that we do. We ran a program a couple of months ago, and all through COVID, we weren't sure what was going to happen or not because of the travel restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. But we ran a program called Mission Discovery with one of our space education partners out of the US. So they came down to Singapore. We took about 150 kids out of schools, and we made a provision where there was investment for kids from sort of lower socioeconomic backgrounds to join what was essentially a week of working with astronauts and scientists from NASA. So we had Scott Kelly, we had Tony Antonelli, we had Steve Swanson, Dr. Sarah Murray, and we had a whole bunch of excited kids. And we spent a week with them just helping them. It wasn't just a technical program. The mission was to build something, an experiment that could be, the best one would be taken up to the ISS. But I think the idea was to promote excitement for space. So, what sort of leadership skills do you need? What sort of subjects or STEM career should you be focused on? How do you work as a team? What sort of technology skills do you need? So that was a really fun exercise to do, because we're very aware that talent is you mentioned it's I think Asia is actually full of, the potential here is huge. But we do need education programs to inspire and bring, that next generation on the journey with us, because what we're building will need an army of people to keep, developing on top of that. So that was one of the more exciting, fun things that we did. But the thing that I'm really proud of that we did late last year is we signed an agreement with Austin in Singapore, the Office of Space and Technology. And it was a statement of intent, really, to say, to help them expand Singapore's emerging space and technology environment. So what does that mean? We help them with the education and enablement of startups. We look at open data programs where universities can put their data on cloud for free. So, it's open to even more innovation. People are looking at it. Essentially anything that will help deliver training and enablement, particularly around cloud for space missions, to help the industry grow. And for me, that's something that has allowed me to get in touch with a lot of the local people, but also, we've seen interest from the Philippines and people outside of, again, Singapore is the hub. So people from around the region have expressed interest in the program. So it's good to see that evolve. And is there anything? And we're going to do things together, aren't we? SSTL and AWS. So I'm also excited for later on this year. Yes, with ITU, you can say a little bit about what your team is doing, because I'm really enabling. I'm not really driving it, but I'm excited about things like these.
Yeah, well, first of all, very thank you to Money, through Money and then to AWS. We had the program, a space program that we did with the Institute of Technical Education. And it was really funny. It was really interesting because Money and I, we're very strong advocates for women in STEM and women in space. So we told them, we need to have at least 30% young ladies. They're between 15 to 18 years old. And initially there was a little bit of struggle, right? So we told the school to open it up to more people. And eventually we had so many women who joined us. And the director, who is a male, he said, you know what, I'm going to give all the girls the shot. So it became a class of 100% women. We felt really bad, but we're really excited because in September, we're doing it again with the boys who were left out, but and having another exciting program for them. But it was really interesting to see how the students were taking part. They were building antenna, they were understanding communications, they were understanding space data sets. But that took a lot of effort to convince the participants, because they wouldn't necessarily consider space as a career for themselves. So that was very meaningful to do. I think also what took place a month ago was the AWS Austin Space Entrepreneurship Workshop, which it was a very good platform for many Singaporean founders. Some of us joined as well to understand the business planning, and then to understand the support that they can leverage in the ecosystem, such as AWS Cloud, in scaling up their business. And it was a combination of Zoom, hybrid, in-person.
Yeah.
It is that in Singapore we call rojak, it's like
rojak.
Yummy, and it's $3 a plate.
Yeah.
Very yummy. If you travel here, I'll take you out for that. Where it's like, oh, because I had someone going, so I'd say, oh, it's Zoom, then it's in person. I mean, it's over the. Then it was in person. So I thought it was really fun to get the community to come together. So very grateful to Austin and AWS for doing this. And of course, I want to talk about something that is important in Singapore and globally, which is in air pollution and urban heat sustainability. I think AWS is a very strong advocate, and you are a very strong advocate. What are some of the initiatives or things we can look out for relating to space technology? How you or AWS can support the sustainability challenges and initiatives?
So, when we talked, when I mentioned those examples earlier, particularly EOFactory, part of the reason I mentioned it is because companies like EOFactory, and there are lots of other global examples, AGB's Satellite View is a company in the UK, Maritime Gatehouse is another company in the US. All of these companies are utilizing space tech to do something meaningful towards a sustainable planet, towards sustainable living, towards protecting the planet from eroding the boundaries that we've already broken in so many ways. So climate change, we know that 50% of the essential climate change variables can only be measured from space. We know that we have technology to monitor greenhouse emissions. There's enough technology at our hands, at our disposal, to actually build solutions that can make a difference to how we tackle sustainability. So I think, again, in as much as we did the evangelization for space, there actually now needs to be some sort of we need to tell stories, Lynette. I think we need to tell stories that help people understand the power that we have in our hands. This power of space technology can actually solve some of these global challenges that we are faced with. And it's, part of the reason why I have this thing with the kids and the next generation is because they see no barriers to what maybe, between policy and governments aligning together to have, this is the way we need to do things. I don't think they don't see those barriers, right? They just see, oh, we have this technology, we can do it. So what can we look forward to? I'm an eternal optimist. I think a lot of the work that we're doing is going to pave the way towards seeing some of these technologies and solutions deployed at scale to actually tackle some of these problems that we're having. In Australia, we have CSIRO, which is the equivalent of Singapore's A-Star, maybe, and they have a mission. They have a mission called AquaWatch. In fact, they have lots of missions, and it's all centered around sustainability, protecting the globe, Australia, but more broadly, food security, bushfire resilience, a lot of planetary things that impact the country. They're looking at how do we solve for those. So I think we have the technology, we have the manpower, the brain power. I guess it takes what is it, Margaret Mead quote, a committed bunch of citizens. Nothing can stand in the way of those who really want to make a difference. But that's kind of I kind of feel like that we need to set those markers for ourselves or for the people that are coming, because we can talk all day about technology, but it's not the technology, right? I mean, it is, the technology enables, but it's the rest. So
the humans at the driver's seat, it's our mission and our purpose. It's us driving it, and the technology enables us, to get to where we are. So I think it's really great that you talk a lot about it to motivate and move people to do the right things using the correct technologies to do that, and of course having the support of AWS to enable it to scale and to reach even more people. I do hear a question from Rika. In particular, I'm not sure if you're based in Singapore, Rika, but her question is, how is AWS helping the space ecosystem in Singapore to bring it to a global stage and help represent Asians in the international space economy?
That's a great question. So, I mean, the work that we're doing with the startups, part of our mission is once they're running on AWS and they're robust, their TRL levels are acceptable to global customers, what we do is we help them scale. So we take them, we take them global. So that's the first thing. We run accelerator programs, global accelerator programs, which allow the founders of these companies to connect with the right VCs to get the right level of investment. So there's lots of things that we do aside from just providing the technology or the innovative services that their technology is built on. It's how to go to market, how to access venture capital, a fully integrated, go-to-market plan. And we do a lot of sort of, if you attended the masterclasses, a lot of those were really just business coaching. How do you set up a company? What does success look like? What's the minimum viable product look like? There's a distinction between, the commercial aspects of running a successful startup. And then from a founder perspective, often if they're technical, they're so focused on the technicality of it. You know, we help in a lot of different ways. And as for the question about, you know, exposing the talent in Asia, I have a small team, and it's a team that is entirely Asia-based. We don't, you know, I have peers in Europe and I have peers in the US, but I have an Asia team, and that Asia team is growing, which means that our customer base in Asia is growing. Amazon's a very data-driven company, so the only way I grow is if my customer base grows. So I have every motivation to make sure the Singaporean and the Asian space ecosystem is continually growing, continually represented. And I think, you know, the best things are yet to come. There's so much that's already been done in the Asian space industry. I find that, and this is the effects of the whole global, it looks like everything happens at NASA and the US and maybe ESA, because Torsten's listening and Chiara is listening. But in actual fact, lots of exciting things happen in Asia. It's the media and the storytelling that I think we could do a lot more on. You know, the ISRO in India went to Mars way ahead of NASA years before, and on a fraction of the budget that NASA did it on. So are these things that people generally know about? Not really. And you know, we could pull out stories from Japan, we could pull out stories from Indonesia, we could pull out stories from right here in Singapore. And I kind of rant a little bit about storytelling, but it literally is that. We've got to do it, and then we've got to talk about it. We've got to win a customer, a contract, and then talk about it. And you know, there's no shame in explaining or talking about what you're doing, because you don't know, the story that you're telling might actually encourage an entrepreneur or two, others who might be thinking of those ideas, maybe too nervous to start. You know, you're going to be the trailblazer in many cases, but it'll come.
Right. Nice story there. You know, and I wonder if, you know, you talk about the Asian story and the landscape. Traditionally, in many of the countries that have been in the space industry for a longer period of time, you know, NASA, like you pointed out, JAXA, ESA, there is a strong reliance, it seems, on government contracts. Do you think the way Asia has leapfrogged into the industry, they could survive without being reliant or dependent on government contracts?
So that's an interesting question, because like it or not, the biggest budgets across Asia, in Australia, the biggest space budget is actually from the government. In Japan, very similar. India, very similar. You know, there's hundreds of space startups in India. ISRO is supporting a lot of them. The best ones get taken into their in-house facility. They've set up mechanisms to encourage the growth of the sector as a whole. Can they thrive by themselves? It really depends. You know, if you've got dual use technology, if you're working specifically for a space mission, but you know, you have maybe quantum technology that can be deployed elsewhere, then you've got a different profile of an investor who is interested in you. If you're building, so basically you've got to know who you're aiming for when you're innovating, when you're creating a product or a service that you're building for the space sector. I don't think it's detrimental that it is the way it is, because most of the Asian governments see the economic value that space has to offer. From a geopolitical perspective, they're completely aware of why it's important to have a national space priority. Every Asian country, I think, particularly over the last few years, has become more and more interested or vested in having space programs. So I don't think it's a bad thing that that the governments still have such a big role to play in Asia is a bad thing, because they're not coming and going. You know, they've been steadfastly there. I think if anything, the addition of the commercial investment from private enterprises just makes it a more attractive option for Asian companies. You know, now you can expect maybe a Temasek to be interested in what you're doing, or a Space Capital to be interested in what you're doing. So I think you've just doubled. I think it's yeah. I think there's a lot at stake.
Right. So I think we have time for one or two more questions, and I will take the one first from Anna, which is interesting in this interesting geopolitical climate, that we are in. The space sector is strongly subjected to export controls. How does that affect you, Mani, when you are working with companies based in different countries?
So that is entirely dependent on that company and how they want to navigate their end customer requirements. I don't really have a say or influence on where they want to export to, whether they want to stay local or go local. We can advise them based on their commercial objectives, but that is entirely up to the company and the direction they want to take that company in.
Okay. So then maybe in particular for AWS, right? Very specifically, does AWS provide AI design, modeling services for machine learning or deep learning? And then how does AWS differentiate itself from other cloud service providers?
I can't talk about how we differentiate from other cloud providers, but I can tell you that we've got a very robust offering around what we call SageMaker. So there's a studio modeling set for AI, for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And a lot of it is actually available online. With the onset of COVID, we made a lot of learning available free online for anyone who's interested in getting to grips with the basics of SageMaker or machine learning. It's all available online. So I would strongly encourage you to look at AWS training and then just go into any of we've got over 200 services, and there's trainings that can help you become more familiar with what the offering is. And if I can do it, and I'm not a software scientist by background, most of you will be able to do it. I mean, it's that level of simplicity that's been embedded into it. So I would encourage whoever asked that question to have a bit of a search online and see what you can do to equip yourself with some of the tool sets that are out there.
And I think we've got one last question before we break off. Earth observation and the public good. This is a question by Christoph. When satellite companies, they move up the value chain and they, deliver analytics, they hold on to their data. So it then makes it difficult for others to create the same or similar training data sets. Seemingly a bit selfish, but obviously we understand for business reasons, they might need to hold on to that. In your view, and you can be philosophical about it, how do you find a balance to serve the market for public good and still ensure business competitiveness?
That's a good question. So I'll start with what we do at AWS. We are working together with a lot of public good organizations. That includes NASA, that includes the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia, NOAA, ESA. We host a lot of satellite data, Copernicus, Sentinel-1, 2. We're talking to JAXA. We'll host data. Anything that we think is useful, we'll put it on the cloud, and we'll host it for free. And we want to do that because there are startups that we support today that work with these free open data sets, and they are building algorithms that they can then commercialize. So it's not the data itself, it's they're using it as learning data to create something new. There's always a way, in terms of competitiveness, if you want to build out new business models, I think ways to do it. You just have to think really hard about who's the client, what problem do you want to solve, or who's the customer that you want to solve a problem for, and work backwards from there. In terms of commercial versus for good, I guess you could ask that of any business, right? Lynette, why don't you consult and teach all of Singaporean education system on space for free? I could. We both could. So, no, I think there's so many different ways to answer that, but the balance between what we need to do for good or for philanthropic reasons has to always be weighed against the commercial aspects. So there's businesses that create and generate revenue, and maybe they offset some of that and that's what that's what AWS is trying to do. So that is sort of the middle ground that I can see. I don't really know how to answer that question of should it be this way or that way.
I also think the new business model and the new way we are working should be discussing a common shared value in businesses, private organizations, and government organizations. For some reason, in the last 20 to 30 years after the Industrial Revolution, companies are for profit and everything else is not for profit, but they are important. And that diversion did not happen since time immemorial. That diversion is recent. And right now, I feel the world should be coming back into a convergence where we should be paying to do good. If someone is advocating the greater good, they should be paid a good salary. They should be, compensated. They shouldn't be expected to do it for free. And I feel what should strongly happen is people should stop paying for things that should not happen. Right. So when we are chasing shareholders' value, that value is going to change and enlarge from just financial returns into the value of contribution to society, to the planet, and to the greater mission of humanity. And that alignment, I'm advocating it here. Thanks, Torsten, for giving me this opportunity. And I think we need to recognize that good things have a value. It has a commercial value, and that commercial value can coexist with a greater value. And how we have done businesses in the past, where there are two different values, financial value and greater good, are different sets. That time needs to end. So that's my ideal, hopeful view about how we can rationalize some of this, tension about greater good and whether that brings financial returns or shareholder value. I think that era should be long gone, and it should be over and behind us. I know I'm mindful of your time, Mani. You are going at 100 miles per hour. Thank you for that wonderful hour, with us, and for sharing. You've taken us to Asia. You've taken us, across the different capabilities that AWS provide. You've talked about education. You talk about companies. You've talked about business plans. It's really wonderful how you're sharing your experience and your insights, with us. So I'm going to hand it back over to Torsten and Chiara. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, both to Lynette and Mani, for this great talk. It's been really, really nice to listen in. And thank you to our audience as well for asking all these questions. So before we leave you for today, I'd just like to give a brief rundown of our next upcoming events. So actually today, in about 6 hours, we have our next Space Café Israel by Medad Parianti, who will be talking with Dr. Anna Heller about the story of a high school nano satellite program that became a legend. And the theme for this talk is to never give up on your dreams. Then on the 30th of August, we'll have our next 33 minutes with Davide Petrillo on the question, is there enough room for the youth in the European space sector? And how does the Space Generation Advisory Council see the situation? On the 2nd of September, we'll have our next event by the Space Arbitration Association with Laura Zielinski, looking to answer the question, can space arbitration protect space investments? And then on the 9th of September, we'll have our next Space Café Canada by the wonderful Dr. Jessica West, who will be talking with Professor Ram Jaku and David Kuan-Wei Chen on the topic of the recently published McGill Manual of International Law. All our events are going to be online on Eventbrite, as always. And as always, we love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And you can also share your feedback with us personally, because we will be attending the World Space Business Week, the Space Generation Congress, and the IAC in Paris. So just let us know if you'll be attending as well. Don't forget to sign up for our daily and our bi-weekly newsletters. And if you want to treat yourselves to something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us out in the supporter program. Again, huge thank you to Lynette and Mani for being our guests and for having this very inspiring talk today. And a huge thank you to the entire team behind the scenes for doing this great job week in and week out. I hope that you all stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for asking all your questions. I hope to see you later on and in the next weeks. And in the meantime, visit our website, follow us on social media, and don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you.